Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're, depending on where you're logging in from. Welcome to our webinar on the Pool Pilot Professional. I will be your presenter. Matthew will be fielding any questions that come through. If you have questions that you'd like to ask, you can use either the chat bar or the question and answer bar. We prefer you use the question and answer bar, but you can use both if you like. Our up and coming webinars that we have coming up, we have next Tuesday, June the 30th at 3 p.m., the ORP/total control. And on July the 7th, we have the water chemistry at 3 p.m. For you guys out in the field, we have our factory direct support line. The hotline number there is the 727-456-7426. That'll put you right in into the tech queue. So that way you bypass any homeowners or any dealers calling in. We also have our videos that we have on YouTube for your common how-tos. That's a forever growing library. More and more videos will be coming. This is our Pool Pilot Professional. Custom built to order. Single display panel, controls up to 6 cells with 6 individual power modules. The great thing about that is you have 1 or 2 go down, you have a 6-cell system. You still have 4 other cells, working, unlike other systems that are one power supply, 1 cell. Up to almost 16 pounds of output per day. Now remember, that's at high power. And that's at a 24-hour pump run time and 100% output. You have 2 different power levels. You got low power level, which is 6.5 amps, and you got high power level, which is 8 amps. The system also is built with a soft reverse. Compatible with ORP controllers via using a dry contact. We work with any chemistry controller out there. If it has a dry contact, it's just a 2-wire connection. If it doesn't have a dry contact, we make what's called a 110 ORP relay kit that you can hook up and plug into the 115 outlet on the bottom that typically controls a Stenner pump. We got the magnetic hydraulic circuit breaker. That's so, you can kill power right there at the unit, and outside of where the power comes into the unit, it kills power after that, so you can work on boards or whatever else have you. It's got temp compensation if it's not connected to ORP. And we have convection cells or inline cells. You'll see that in later slides. This is our patented manifold, up to 6 cells in it. You'll notice that we did move the tri-sensor down here. And a regular manifold, the tri-sensor is up here, but with manufacturing chlorine through these three cells, the last thing you want it to do is hit our tri-sensor. It'll eat away the flow paddle. So the tri-sensor has been moved down here. This is our convection cell. This works perfectly for if you have surge tanks or backpack systems. You can get convection cells that'll drop right in the surge tank or the backpack system. And then the only thing you have to plumb in is a 2-inch T that houses our tri-sensor. Once again, our patented manifold, it's going to slow the water flow down and allow greater chlorine production inside the cells to reach breakpoint chlorination. We operate at lower flows than straight inline cells or bigger cells. We operate somewhere between 15 gallons to 20 gallons per minute with our patented manifold. The patented manifold can handle up to 70 gallons per minute. We got a dedicated salt sensor. We're not like other systems out there that utilize the cell to try and determine what the salt level is. We actually have dedicated salt prongs, and we have a salt calculator that'll tell you that if the salt level's low, how many pounds of salt to add to get it back up to 3,000. 3,000 is the minimal of where we want the system to operate at. In our patented manifold, as you can see, we have the cells, we have the tri-sensor, the debris screen. So this manifold does still have the debris screen, and once again installed with the pins face up. The cell cord should be plugging down onto the cell. Manifold should be placed downstream of all pool equipment. And if this happens to be on a pool spa combination, should be on the pool return line only, unless it's partnered up with the ORP system that registers chlorine. And always be mindful of the direction of flow. This is a bypass manifold that you need to build if the flow rate is going to exceed 70 gallons per minute. And on a commercial application, that is more common than anywhere else. So, yeah, it's all, I don't want to say it's mandatory, but it's almost mandatory on every commercial application. This is our tri-sensor. Notice it says use the 986-ST simulator. That's for any flow, salt, or temperature issues. We'll get into how to use that later on. This is a breakaway of our tri-sensor. It's got a flow paddle, the salt sensors, the temperature sensor, and the alignment tab. All right, and we mentioned earlier about temperature compensation. You know, our system keeps track of temperature because if the system's not being controlled by an ORP controller, we all know this in the pool industry, as water temperature increases, the demand for chlorine goes up. So we've built into our unit temperature compensation, which means as the water temperature rises, the system will self-adjust to the temperature. And not only that, the system also uses temperature for the salt calibration and reading salt. You know, warmer water is more conductive than colder water, so we're reading salt through resistance. So if we don't factor temperature into the equation, temperature could affect the salt reading. We actually take water temperature into the salt equation to factor out salt. Last but not least, we have the alignment tab. Now, on the alignment tab, that should be pointed in the direction of the flow of the water. So if you're replacing a tri-sensor and you pull it out and can't remember which way it goes, that alignment tab should be pointed in the direction of the flow of the water. Here we have a picture of our cell cord. This is a banana cell cord. We actually have a cell cord that's manufactured for the AutoPilot Professional that doesn't have those banana plugs on it. It actually has 3 bare wires because the cell cord is hardwired onto the AutoPilot Professional inside the power supply on terminal blocks for each one of the cell cords. If you manage to get one of these on accident, you can actually take, and there's a little heat shrink area right here. If you go below that heat shrink area and cut it and strip it back, you'll have 3 wires. Here you have 2 plugs, but 2 wires are soldered together to become this red line, and then you have the black line. So if you go back here before the heat shrink, that's before the solder joint for the 2 wires that become the red plug. There's actually 3 wires in the cell cord. You've got 1 wire going to each one of these plug holes. And on a AutoPilot Professional, you have 3 prongs that the cell cord plugs down onto. Once again, those are 12 foot in length. Unless you're dealing with a convection cell, the convection cells come in a 25 and a 50 foot length. On the PPC5 at 8 amps, it will manufacture just right at 2.62 pounds or gallons of chlorine per day. You'll hear me switch back and forth when I'm talking about chlorine and how much the unit manufactures between pounds and gallons. And that's because 1 pound is equivalent to 1 gallon of liquid chlorine. Here's some pictures of some installations that we have. As you can see, this unit is hooked up to an ORP system, 6-cell system. Another installation. And one more. This is a double system. You can see 2 power supplies here, and that's because we had a double bank of cells, 2 manifolds. And you can see that bypass that I was telling you with that most commercial applications are going to have. We have pictured on the bypass as a 5-pound check valve, but 5-pound check valves are pretty hard to get when you get into the larger plumbing. So ball valves or butterfly valves are typically used. We have a rental and lease program. That's what's awesome about our AutoPilot Professional. The large cost of the equipment can sometimes deter a place from, purchasing a salt system. But with our rental and lease program, we stretch that payment out over 3-4 years. And, every place of business typically has money budgeted for, for chlorine and other chemicals to take care of the pool. So once you price it out, thing is being goofy again. Once you price it out, you can show them that, hey, you can get a salt system and spend less money per month than you are on the chemicals that you're buying right now. With a rental and lease program, with, we have 1 year part and labor warranty, and then we have a part warranty on the units for the remainder of the warranty. So you get a first year of labor. Now, Patty, I do understand that outside of continental U.S. that changes. It's just from what I understand, it's just a part only warranty. But the units stay under warranty on the parts for the whole term of the lease or the rental, and that includes cells. That's the only time that depletion of a cell would be covered under warranty, as in a commercial rental. If it's a lease, you actually have the option at the end of it to buy the equipment out if you want to. Or at the end of the rental or the lease, if you continue, they want to continue on with salt, you can turn around and sell them a whole new unit. Naturally terms will be renegotiated or whatever else, but once again, they'll go right back under a brand new warranty. The memory and programming are held on the 830 board or the display board for the PoolPilot Professional. So the unit won't hold program settings, or the unit won't hold the time of day, or the unit won't hold calibration or parameters. It's going to be the 830 board or the digital display board. They're one and the same. Troubleshooting, there is an audible alarm inside the PoolPilot Professional that can be disarmed in the programming if you want to disarm it, but there is an audible alarm that comes on whenever there's the check system light comes on. Cells not found is one of the messages that will be displayed on the PoolPilot Professional. With cells not found, that could be a cell cord unplugged that burn up at the terminal strip. That could be the incoming power to the power module, where the blue and brown wire bring the power module to 240 voltage or the high voltage. They could be burned up. The display fuse could be burnt out. The power fuse could be burnt out, or there could be corrosion on the ribbon connector, or it could be a bad power module. Check flow. Check flow, you're going to troubleshoot just like you would any other system. You're going to plug your 986-ST in to see if the flow message goes away. If you plug your tri-sensor simulator into the unit and the flow message goes away, that means there's not an issue with the power supply, that you need to be troubleshooting outside the power supply, via the manifold or actual flow issues. So the message goes away, you're going to check your debris screen. You're going to check your check valve to make sure your check valve is working. Now in the PoolPilot Professional, it's a 5-pound check valve, unlike the residential. The residential is a 3-pound check valve. So it's a little bit more heavy duty check valve in the PoolPilot Professional, because we're having to force enough water to go up through and fill the potential of 6 cells. But you want to make sure that that check valve is working properly, that it's open and closing properly. You want to check and make sure the union screen's not caked up with stuff. You want to make sure that the cells aren't scaled up, especially when using the PPC5 or what used to be the CC15 cells. There's 15 blades in there, and it's very easy if there's some just slight calcification in between each one of the blades throughout the 3, 4, 5, or 6 cells, whatever you have, that it's not allowing enough water flow to go through the cells. Once you've checked all that, if you do have a stuck check valve, you need to wrap the debris screen in some plastic, close the manifold back up, and force all the water through the bottom manifold. and hopefully whatever debris has got this stuck out here will blow through and allow the check valve to close again. If that check valve is stuck out here in the open area and you can't get it to close, then you're going to have to put in a new bottom manifold. Also, I will tell you, on commercial applications, a lot of check flows I get, we looked at that picture earlier that had the big butterfly valve in between the two manifolds that were split off. A lot of times, pool guy will come in there looking to get his flow rates up, and he'll open up that butterfly valve, and that'll rob water from our manifolds, and you'll wind up with a check flow message. So also, on the check flow message, if you plug the simulator in and the message doesn't go away, that means there's a problem inside the power supply. All right, that's either going to be your 848 board, which is what I call the interface board. That's where your tri-sensor plugs into, or if you have an old one, the old ones used to be mounted in the side of the box to where you couldn't plug a tri-sensor into it. The newer ones actually have enough room now where you can actually plug the tri-sensor in. The old ones, the tri-sensor used to be hardwired to that board. So you might need to check the connections there where it's hardwired if it's an older system. But on a newer system, the tri-sensor should be plugged into a tri-sensor port, just like you see on any of the other units that we have that take a tri-sensor. All right. So if you plug that in and the message doesn't go away, you're looking at a bad 848 board or a bad ribbon cable that goes between the 848 board and the 830 board, or a bad 830 board, which is, once again, the digital display board. Low salt, or if there's erroneous salt messages on the unit, you've done a manual check of the salt in the pool and it's coming up 3,000, the AutoPilot saying 1,100, you're going to want to plug your simulator in. Now, unlike flow, when you plug the simulator in for a flow message, flow is almost instantaneous. Within a couple seconds, if there's not a problem with the power supply, that flow message will go away. Salt, however, it's a resistance read, so it takes about a minute to a minute and a half for the system to acclimate itself to the simulator. So you want to plug the simulator in, you want to give it about a minute and a half for it to acclimate. After it acclimates, you want to do a test pool pilot, and the unit should be reading the simulator at right around 2,200 parts per million salt. If it's not reading the simulator at 2,200 parts per million salt, then the unit needs to be calibrated. For that, I'm going to advise you to call into customer support or reach out to your sales rep or somebody that can walk you through how to calibrate the unit using the simulator. Outside of that, once if it's out of calibration, once you calibrate it, you should be able to plug the tri-sensor back in, and it should come closer to the manual readings that you got when you did a test. If you plug the simulator in and the unit is reading the simulator perfectly, it means there's not an issue with the power supply. There's nothing to correct there. It means you have a tri-sensor issue. There's only one or two things that could be wrong with the tri-sensor if it's not reading the right salt. Either it's scaled up or it's fouled. So you would take the tri-sensor out of the T, you would clean the salt prongs, first using the degreaser solution, Dawn dish detergent, or if you have like a filter degreaser that a lot of pool guys carry on their truck to clean cartridge filters or DE grids, you can use a degreaser like that, or like I said, just a Dawn dish detergent. Clean it with the degreaser first, then you'll clean it with rubbing alcohol next, and then last but not least, you'll clean it with a muriatic acid solution. And that should remove anything that could have built up potentially on the salt prongs. Once you've got them cleaned, you'll reinsert it back into the T. You'll turn the system back on, giving it a minute to a minute and a half to acclimate. And if your salt readings don't come closer together, you've got a bad tri-sensor. As far as salt goes, any salt can be used in our systems as far as manufacturing chlorine. But you only want to use 99% pure pool salt. And the reason why is the impurities that are in other types of salt. You don't want to use water softener salt. Back when I originally started installing salt systems back in the late 80s, early 90s, the only salt we could get was from a farming supply company called Southern States. and there are 80-pound bags of Morton salt, but those 80-pound bags contained a substance called YPS, which was yellow appreciative soda, and it had the potential to stain the pool shell yellow. So once again, you want to use 99% pure salt. With the salt application, our system does not have a high limit on the salt. We actually have our systems on ocean water pools that the salt's 35,000 parts per million in the water. Our system loves salt. So unlike other systems out there, when you add the salt, you may have to turn the system off while adding the salt so it doesn't go out on high salt. You don't have to worry about with ours. All you do is dump the salt in the deep end, brush it towards the main drain, allow it to get sucked into the circulation system. That's just going to help get it dissolved more rapidly and evenly distributed throughout the whole pool. You also want to test the salt that's already in the water. If this is a new system going on a pool, pools that have been on liquid chlorine for a long time can potentially have already high concentrations of salt. I've been to some pools that were, I test the salt in the water and they were at 2,000 to 2,200, and they've never been on a salt system, and it was solely from being on liquid chlorine. Liquid chlorine is a salt-derived chlorine. So it's just going to save you money. Test the salt, test the pool, find out what the salt is, and then add, 50 pounds for every 2,000 gallons. So if your pool was at 0 parts per million and you had a 15,000 gallon pool, you need to add 350 pounds of salt to get it up to 3,000 parts per million. When to add the salt. And adding salt to the pool, you want to follow the plaster manufacturer's recommendations if this is a new pool build or a new plaster job. Most of them out there are, telling you to wait 30 days or 4 weeks to 6 weeks before you add salt to the pool to give the plaster time to cure. Myths about salt. Salt is corrosive. 4 parts per million chlorine is 10 times more corrosive than 4,000 parts per million salt. Don't get me wrong, salt can get corrosive at a certain level. We'll discuss that on the next slide. But where your pools are operating at between 3,000, 3,500, 4,000, the corrosion factor is not there. Most of the time when you got corrosion going on in a swimming pool, it's due to the high concentration of chlorine that's in the water. Salt is an alternative sanitizer. I love how winners are like, I don't have a chlorine pool, I got a salt pool. No, you have a chlorine pool. All right. Salt is not a sanitizer in and of itself. We're actually breaking the salt down and making it chlorine. So they do have a chlorine pool. Salt is not compatible with any other forms of chemicals or chlorine. We only manufacture chlorine when there's water flow. And as long as there's water flow, you have dilution. So long as you have dilution, you're not going to get a chemical reaction from any of the pool chemicals that you add to the water to maintain the pool. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Typically, muriatic acid and chlorine don't get along. They create what's called mustard gas. But with our total control system, we actually inject acid into the manifold before our cells. And because the acid is diluted by the water, there's no reaction when it goes through the cells, and you're not spitting mustard gas outside the pool returns. Dilution is the solution. So salt levels, typical salt chlorinators run between 25 and 3,500 parts per million. That's just right at or below the human taste threshold. The human body and tears are anywhere between 4,000 and 9,000 parts per million. And saline solution is at 6,000 parts per million. That's why that little dotted line is there. At 6,000 parts per million, salt can become even corrosive to stainless steel. So you do not want to get your salt level up around 6,000 parts per million. And also remember this, when it comes to reading salt in the water, we're fairly accurate at reading salt, but it is not an exact science. So even the number that we give you on a salt reading is kind of a roundabout number. So you just don't want to get anywhere close to 6,000 parts per million if the pool wasn't designed to handle that. The pools I talked to you about that have our systems that have ocean water running through it, they were designed to handle salt levels that high. And you got ocean water at 35,000 parts per million. Pool Pilot Professional bad temp sensor. Once again, you're going to use your tri-sensor simulator. You're going to plug that into you're going to unplug the tri-sensor, plug the simulator in. Once again, it's a resistance read, so you got to give it a minute to a minute and a half to acclimate. If after you plug the simulator in, the message goes away, you've got a bad tri-sensor. If you plug the simulator in and the message doesn't go away, you first need to check to see if the unit's out of calibration and needs calibration. If you calibrate it and it doesn't hold the calibration, you know you've got a bad part. You've either got a bad 848 board, a bad ribbon cable between the 848 board and the 830 board, or you've got a bad 830 board, which once again is the digital display board. Low amp cell displayed or check cell, clean cell, either one of those messages. You definitely want to verify the salt level. And cold water temps could play a factor in this. You want to check the cells to make sure they're not scaled up. You know, you want to make sure you don't have loose or defective cell cords. Make sure that the cell cord isn't burned up down at the plug that goes onto the cell, or you want to make sure that it's not burned up at the terminal block that it gets hardwired to. And then you want to check the cells for physical depletion. 0 volts, 0 amps, you want to make sure that there's an actual call for chlorine. You know, the Pool Pilot Professional does have a boost mode. It doesn't have a boost button, but if you go into the programming, you can go into the installer menu and you can actually turn the boost mode on, and you can actually set the hours of how long you want the boost cycle to run. But anytime you walk up and do a test, the cell has to be energized. All right, you got 0 volts and 0 amps with the system energized or the cell energized. You're going to want to check your cell fuse. All right, you're going to want to check your power module to see if the power fuse is blown and you know that you're actually getting power to that cell. Check cell, clean cell, low amp cell question mark. You know, this is on how to use your volts and amps chart. And as it says here in the blue, as I just told you, you do always have to you know, do a test with the cell in operation. So we ask that you activate the boost button. You want to make sure that salt's, you know, at least 3,000 and water temperature is 75 degrees. You know, low salt, cold water temperatures will affect volts and amps. Salt water is conductive. Cells require salt, water, and electricity to generate chlorine. And the cell has to be cleared of all calcium to be able to generate chlorine efficiently. The current has to be able to pass from cell blade to cell blade. Now, when a cell is generating chlorine, what you have is you have a plus charge blade and a negative charge blade. Let me back this up to start over. This little greenish white area resembles a slight calcification that can build up on cell blades while they're manufacturing chlorine. So as they're manufacturing chlorine, as the positive charge leaves this blade, it pushes the calcification off. The positive charge comes in contact with this blade, and that's where your chlorine and your sodium hydroxide are being manufactured. So just remember, there's two products being manufactured when a cell is manufacturing chlorine. It's manufacturing chlorine and it's manufacturing sodium hydroxide. That's why with pools that are on salt chlorine generators, you'll notice that there's always a steady climb in the pH, and that's due to the sodium hydroxide. So when cells clean themselves, very simply how this is done is the blade that was positive now becomes negative. The blade that was negative now becomes positive. Now the positive ions are leaving this blade, pushing the calcification off of this blade, coming in contact with this blade, creating the chlorine and the sodium hydroxide. And like I said, you'll get that light white film of calcium build up on the cell blades. The systems come out of the factory preset for 4-hour reversal period, but they can be set for 2, 4, 6, or 2, 4, 8, or 16 reverse cycles. Now, with the Pool Pilot Professional, it's a little bit different setup than this. Don't pay attention to these positive and negatives here, because how a Pool Pilot Professional works, there's three prongs. So this blade is connected to one prong, the center blade is connected to a prong, and then this blade is connected to a prong. And what happens is when the outside two blades are positive charge, the middle one is negative charge. So what happens is the current will travel from the right blade into the center and the left blade into the center. Then when the system reverses polarity, the center blade will become positive. The outside two blades will become negative. So the positive charge will come in on the center blade and then travel from center to left and from center to right. And that's how the PPC5 cells operate. If the unit is in boost mode, turn the boost mode off. This is how you do a proper test pool pilot. If it's in boost mode, turn the boost off. Power the system down. Power it back up again. Activate the boost when it comes out to the purifier screen. After activating the boost, you wait 20 seconds and then you do a test. After you do a test, it's going to give you the volts and amps on each one of the cells. And via that reading, you can use your volts and amps charts to determine where you need to start your troubleshooting. And typically the way it works, once you've done the test and done it properly, if you're getting high volts and low amps, you're going to want to start troubleshooting at the cell and cell cord and work your way backwards towards the power supply. If you do this test properly and you got low volts and low amps, you want to start troubleshooting the power supply. You've more than likely got a bad power module or a blown fuse on the power module. This is our volts and amps chart. This is just giving you, what the cells typically operate at whatever power level. Remember, the Pool Pilot Professional has low power, which is 6.5, and high power, which is 8 amps. So your cells are typically going to run in these voltage areas. And as cells age, you will see these voltages climb up. That's normal. Once again, with a check cell, clean cell message or low amp cell question mark message, you want to take the cell out, look for buildup. You want to visually check for cell depletion. On that slide that I showed you previously of how the cells are energized, because the left blade, the right blade, and the center blade are getting direct current from the power supply, they will wear faster than the other blades. So when you're looking for depletion on a PPC5 cell, you want to look at the left, the right, and the center blades, and they will typically be thinner and shorter than the blades next to them. You want to inspect the cell for a corrosion, or the cell cord for corrosion where it plugs down onto the cell, or look up at the terminal strip, see if you have corrosion there or any burn marks. How do cell cords burn up? Loose connections for one, moisture inside the cell cord itself. A lot of times when cells are cleaned, they get cleaned and then water gets left on the post, and then you plug the cell cord back down onto that post with water and moisture there. It's going to corrode the copper brass connections inside the cell cord. The post that the cell cord plugs down onto on the cell, they're titanium. They're impervious to that corrosion. But what happens is once you get corrosion on the copper brass, then you've got a gap between the copper brass connection inside the cell cord and the titanium post on the cell, and it will start arcing on that cell plug, and it will actually pit the titanium. The cell cords actually come with a black substance that's around the copper brass connections. That stuff has a low heat threshold. So if your cord does start arcing against the post, it should melt that black stuff. So if you ever get to a job and see some black oozy stuff coming out of the cell cord, it means that cell cord is arcing, it's overheating, you need to replace it. And hopefully you catch it before it does any damage to the prongs on the cell. Once the prongs on the cell are damaged, it doesn't do any good to plug a brand new cell cord onto that cell, because it's going to start arcing from the moment it's installed. And the cell cord's not fully seated down onto the cell. Once again, if you don't fully seat it, you're going to leave a gap at the top and it's going to arc. Also remember, pull straight up on the cell cord, give it a little wiggle, because it has hand grips on it, wiggling it back and forth. They are tight, so it's okay to wiggle it a little bit. Just don't get overly aggressive, because those connectors inside the cell cord, they are not a complete solid connection. There is a gap that runs the full length of that copper brass connector. So if you're wiggling it back and forth aggressively, you could spread them out and create a gap and create an issue. Also, don't ever pull up on the cell cord itself. You can cause it to lose connection there. Scaled cells, you know, I get calls all the time. I got white flakes coming back to the pool. Looks like it snowed in the spa. You know, to me, that's a good sign. If you're getting white flakes back to the pool, that means my system's reversing polarity and it's pushing that calcification off. It means you've got a water chemistry issue. That calcification, as you can see, what this stuff here that's in this cell blade, that's not going to leave for no reason at all. So if you got white flakes back to the pool, it means my system's reversing polarity, trying to keep the cell clean. All right. You cannot troubleshoot a dirty cell. You know, our systems have what's called a voltage limiter built into it, which is the reason why I gave you the 5-step process of how to do a proper test pool pilot. Because if you let it run long enough, even a scaled cell will give you low volts and low amps due to the voltage limiter. But, you know, so if you got, typically if you've done this test right, like I said, if you got high voltage and low amperage, you're going to pull the cell out. You're going to look at the cell to see if you have any calcification buildup. The only reason why this would ever happen and our system be responsible for it would be if the system isn't reversing polarity. And in the 15 years I've been working here, and the 30 years, in the 15 years I was a pool builder, so combined total of 30 years, I've only ran into 2 or 3 units that weren't reversing polarity. After you've cleaned the cell and removed all the calcification on it, you want to look down through the blades, make sure that you don't have any calcification in the middle of those blades somewhere. You want to get them all good and clean. Typically, the way it works is you can use an 1.5-inch drain out clean out plug to plug the bottom of the cell. Or, you know, with the Pool Pilot Professional manifold, because we've moved the tri-sensor down to the, you know, where it's not up in that upper T, you can actually flip the whole U manifold over and you put your water acid solution right inside the manifold. But you're going to want to put your acid solution in there. You're going to wait till it stops bubbling. And then 1 or 2 things has happened. If it stopped bubbling, it means that either all the calcification has been removed or the acid is so saturated it can't absorb anymore. So you're going to dump the solution out. I advise you to take it to the pool and dump it in the pool because the pH needs to be lowered. But you're going to dump the solution out. You're going to check the cells to make sure they're clear of calcium. And if not, you're going to repeat the process. You know, after it stops bubbling, you've checked them and they're all clear. The other thing you want to look at, like I said, now this is a smaller cell, so it's only got 5 blades. The left and right one, you want to look for depletion. But on a pool, you know, on a PPC5, it's got 15 blades in it. So you'll check the left one, you'll check the right one, and then you'll check the center blade to see if you notice any height difference or thickness in the cell blades. Once again, that's a sign of depletion. This is just going over what I was telling you earlier about which cell blades you want to check. Is the unit producing? This is one thing I love about our convection cells. If you got our convection cells and you got them in a surge tank or vac pack system, you can very simply put the unit on boost, look over into the surge tank or the vac pack system, and, you know, pull each cell up to where you can see whether they're bubbling or not. If the cells are bubbling, they're manufacturing chlorine. Now, if you have a 6-cell manifold, you can pull each cell out. You just have to have a dummy cell to replace it with, or a depleted cell. You can pull the cell out, get that same 1.5-inch drain out clean out plug that you use to clean the cells when they're scaled, plug the bottom of whichever cell you're testing to see if it's working, fill it full of pool water, activate the boost mode, and sit back and see if it's bubbling. Now, I've actually had homeowners ask me, well, how do I know those bubbles are chlorine? Hold it under their nose for about 5 to 10 seconds, and once they start crying, you can move past the fact of whether or not the cell is manufacturing chlorine or not. A blank display on a Pool Pilot Professional, you've either got a blown display fuse, you've got a blown power fuse, And the power fuse is going to be up there by the transformer on the backside of the hydraulic circuit breaker. You got the wrong incoming voltage. You know, the AutoPilot Professional comes out of the factory at 220, and there is no conversion for it. It is to run off of 220. So you might not have a display if you've got it on a double pole breaker and one of the legs has dropped out. You want to check for loose or damaging wiring harness or ribbon cable. Wiring harness is on the older units that don't have an 848 board, and the ribbon cable is for units that have an 848 board. So you want to check that out. Yeah, there's also a 4-pin connector that comes off of the transformer that plugs onto the 830 board. So you're going to want to check that. You could potentially have a bad display board or bad interface board. You could also have a bad hydraulic circuit breaker, or you could have a bad transformer. These are your parts for the AutoPilot Professional. I highly recommend that you go to AutoPilot.com. You click on resources, and if you scroll down, there'll be some blue hyperlinks there on the AutoPilot.com website, and parts breakdown catalog is listed there. If you doing it via computer, you can download it to the computer via desktop or whatever else, or downloads. It's a PDF file. Or if you have a smartphone that has a Books app, you can pull it off of AutoPilot.com and put it straight into your Books app on your smartphone. It's always good to have, you know, because the parts breakdown catalog, it actually has pictures of the part. So, you know, pictures worth 1,000 words. Everybody's got different descriptions of something. I can't tell you how many times I had somebody call up and order a power supply when they truly only wanted a power module. Download the parts breakdown catalog. This is where we have partnered up, and we now have a water-cooled commercial unit. It's a AutoPilot Professional water-cooled unit. You got 6 different models that can manufacture coin from anywhere from 8 pounds a day all the way up to 28 pounds per day. Got a single display, just like our AutoPilot Professional, the one that's not water-cooled. It is UL rated and certified. That it has a dedicated salt sensor, the same as ours. And you know, it's a special kind of salt sensor that they say never needs calibration. The system operates off of 20 gallons of flow. Now this is an offline system, all right? Whereas ours is plumbed right into the pool return line. This is an offline system. This is the inside of the power supply. You've got 2 power boards here. You can see these lines here. These are your water lines for the water cooling. You have a fan that blows across these boards to keep them cool. But this power supply is completely enclosed. So, you know, it's hard for dust, dirt, debris, or whatever else to get in there. This fan does not draw air in from the outside. It just circulates air inside the unit to keep the boards cool. These are what the cells look like. If you need to clean the cells, the top of them simply unbolt and you pull the blades out. This is how the installation goes. This is a water feed tube that goes up into the power supply. This is for the cooling water. All right. So comes out of the pump, goes up inside the power supply, and returns downstream of the filter. Got to have a pressure differential there. All right. You got your incoming power, 208 or 240. Once again, it's a 240 unit. On this side, you've got your other plumbing. You got basically a booster pump, same as what you'd use on some of the vacuum systems out there. But you have a booster pump that's going to take water from the return line here, push it up through the system. It's going to run through the salt sensor. It's going to run through this valve, run up through the flow sensor, and then into the cell. And then it's going to come back down and return downstream of a ball valve. You have to have a ball valve or check valve in here to make sure you're diverting water up into the manifold. If I'm not mistaken, we have a lease and rental program on that as well. All right, back to our trainings coming up. Once again, June 30th at 3 o'clock, we have ORP and total control. July the 7th, we have at 3 p.m. water chemistry. We have our factory technician support line. Once again, that's for your technicians out in the field. They can call in and get directly connected. Not saying they won't be put on hold, but they go ahead of homeowners or dealers calling in. It's a technical support hotline. We have our YouTube videos. And as I said, it's a forever growing library. You might want to check it. What we have on there may be what you're looking for. I want to thank you guys for attending.
All right, Brad, I think you've done a good job covering everything. So I don't see any questions on Q&A or on the chat. So well, thank you very much once again. And I would add that if anybody wants more information on that new Pro water cooled line, there is quite a bit of information on our website, on the AutoPilot.com website.
Yeah, let me touch on that. That is do realize that is a different Pool Pilot Professional than our normal one. There's way more information on our website. So if you're interested in that, I want to take a look at it because it does manufacture. Our one system maxes out at almost 16 pounds. This one maxes out at 28. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they're coming out with a larger cell than that. But right now it maxes out at 28. So you're able to do a much larger body of water with that system. So if you're interested, you can check it out on the autopilot.com. Last but not least, we are made in the USA.